Jennifer Hayes stood in the parking lot of the Stop and Go convenience store at 2:47 inches the morning, her 8-month-old daughter Lily strapped to her chest in a worn baby carrier, watching the night manager lock the doors and drive away. The fluorescent lights above the gas pumps hummed and flickered, casting harsh shadows across the cracked asphalt. Her 1998 Toyota Camry sat in the corner of the lot. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Everything she owned crammed into its trunk and back seat. The front passenger seat had been folded down to create a makeshift changing station. The back seat was where she tried to sleep when Lily finally settled down for a few hours. 3 months. That's how long they'd been living like this. 3 months of rotating between gas stations, rest stops, and the occasional Walmart parking lot. 3 months of heating baby formula in an electric kettle she ran off the cigarette lighter. 3 months of changing diapers in public restrooms and praying no one called Child Protective Services on the homeless woman with the baby. Jennifer checked her phone. The battery icon showed 5%. She'd been careful with it today, only using it to look for job postings and to check her email. The charger was in the car, but she'd need to start the engine to charge anything, and she only had a quarter tank of gas left. $17.32 sat in her checking account. Lily needed more formula. The car needed gas. Jennifer needed food, though she'd gotten used to skipping meals. The night was cold for April in Virginia, cold enough that Jennifer could see her breath. Lily stirred against her chest, making the small grunting sounds that meant she'd wake up hungry soon. Jennifer bounced gently, the motion automatic. After 8 months of motherhood, the baby settled, her tiny fist curling against Jennifer's collarbone. How did it come to this? The question haunted Jennifer every night. A year ago, she'd had a job as a paralegal at a mid-sized law firm in Richmond. She'd had an apartment, small but clean. She'd had a boyfriend, Daniel, who'd seemed supportive when she got pregnant. They'd talked about getting married, about being a family. Then the pregnancy complications started. Preeclampsia at 6 months, forcing her onto bed rest. The law firm had been understanding at first, letting her work from home, but when she'd had to be hospitalized at 7 months, when the bed rest turned into 2 months of doctor's orders not to work at all, understanding turned to frustration. They'd let her go 2 weeks before Lily was born, citing restructuring and budget cuts. The timing was just coincidence, they said. Jennifer knew better, but she had no energy to fight it. Daniel left when Lily was 3 weeks old. Just walked out one morning, while Jennifer was nursing the baby. Said he wasn't ready for this. Wasn't ready to be poor and stressed and trapped. He'd emptied their joint savings account on his way out, taking the $7,000 they'd managed to save for the baby. Left her with nothing but hospital bills from the complicated delivery and a baby who needed everything. Jennifer had tried. God, she'd tried. She'd applied for assistance programs that took months to process. She'd looked for work, but childcare cost more than entry-level positions paid, and she had no family to help watch Lily. Her mother had died from cancer when Jennifer was 19. Her father had remarried and moved to Seattle, starting a new family and making it clear Jennifer wasn't part of his plans anymore. She'd tried reaching out to him when things got desperate, left voicemails and texts explaining the situation. He never responded. The eviction notice had come 67 days after Daniel left. She'd paid what she could, but it wasn't enough. The landlord had a business to run, he said. Nothing personal. On a grey Tuesday in January, a sheriff's deputy had overseen her removal from the apartment. She'd loaded everything into her car, Lily crying, in her car seat the entire time, and driven away with nowhere to go. That was 3 months ago. 93 days of survival mode, of keeping Lily clean, fed, safe, and healthy, while slowly drowning in exhaustion and fear. Jennifer had learned which gas stations let her use their restrooms without buying anything, which parking lots security guards ignored, and which ones they patrolled, which churches ran food pantries on which days. She'd learned to nurse Lily in the driver's seat with a blanket draped over them for privacy. Learned to sleep in 2-hour increments, never fully resting because danger felt constantly close. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort or the hunger. It was the shame, the way people looked at her when she changed Lily's diaper in a public restroom, the dirty looks when she counted out change to buy the cheapest jar of baby food, the way store managers watched her, suspicious and judging, when she lingered too long near the climate-controlled aisles. Jennifer had a college degree, had worked in professional environments, had done everything right, and still she'd ended up here, homeless with a baby, invisible to a world that had decided she didn't matter. Lily started crying, the hungry cry that meant she needed to eat now. Jennifer walked back to the car and got in, turning on the engine just long enough to heat the electric kettle wedged in the cup holder. She'd learned to make formula in the dark, measuring scoops by feel, testing the temperature on her wrist. Lily latched onto the bottle desperately, her small body rigid with hunger. Jennifer watched her daughter eat, this perfect tiny person who depended on her completely, who had no idea how close they were to the edge. Lily's eyes were closed in concentration, her small hand wrapped around Jennifer's thumb. In moments like this, when it was just the two of them in the bubble of the car with the world locked outside, Jennifer could almost pretend everything was okay. Almost convince herself they'd be fine. Her phone buzzed. 5% battery, but a new email had come through. The subject line made her blink twice, certain she was misreading it. Estate notification. Immediate action required. Jennifer opened the email with shaking hands. Lily, still drinking her bottle, in the crook of her left arm. The email was from a law firm in Grayson, Virginia, a small town about 90 miles southwest. It read, "Miss Hayes, we are writing to inform you that you have been named as the sole beneficiary in the estate of Judge Harold Hayes, deceased as of March 29th. As Mr. Hayes's only surviving relative, you have inherited his property and all associated assets. Please contact our office immediately to discuss the transfer. This is a time-sensitive legal matter requiring your signature and presence. Sincerely, Matthews and Associates Legal Services." Jennifer read the email 3 times. Judge Harold Hayes. The name stirred something in her memory, distant and dusty, like a photograph from someone else's life. Her father had mentioned him once, maybe twice, when Jennifer was a child. A great uncle, estranged from the family for reasons no one would explain. Someone who'd left Virginia decades ago and never come back. Jennifer hadn't even known he was still alive, let alone that he'd died and left her anything. She looked at Lily, nearly finished with her bottle, eyes growing heavy with milk-drunk contentment. Could this be real? Or was it a scam, some cruel trick targeting desperate people? Jennifer called the number listed in the email. It was nearly 3 in the morning, but she couldn't wait. A recorded message picked up. "If you find this story engaging, Please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. You've reached Matthews and Associates. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Please leave a message and we'll return your call during business hours. Jennifer left a message, her voice cracking with exhaustion, and hope she was afraid to feel. This is Jennifer Hayes. I received an email about an estate. Please call me back as soon as possible. This number is my cell phone. She hung up and stared at her phone until the screen went dark. Lily had fallen asleep, the bottle fallen from her lips, a small milk bubble at the corner of her mouth. Jennifer burped her gently, changed her diaper using the last clean one from the package, and settled her in the car seat in the back. She covered her daughter with a thin blanket and watched her sleep. This small miracle who'd arrived in the middle of catastrophe. Jennifer didn't sleep that night. She sat in the driver's seat, phone plugged into the charger with the engine idling, using precious gas to keep the battery alive, and researched Judge Harold Hayes. She found obituaries, references to his career as a circuit court judge in Grayson from 1967 to 1994. There were mentions of his reputation as a hard but fair judge, someone who'd presided over hundreds of cases and left an impression on the legal community. There were no mentions of family, no surviving relatives listed, no personal details beyond his professional life. The property he'd owned was listed in one article, an old courthouse building that had been decommissioned in 1998 when the county built a new judicial center. Harold Hayes had purchased the building at auction and lived there for the last 25 years of his life. Alone, a recluse who'd cut ties with everyone from his former life. Jennifer found an image of the building from a historical society website. It was a 3-story brick structure, built in 1897, with tall windows and a copper dome that had turned green with age. The photo showed it in its heyday, flags flying, people on the steps, the center of civic life. A more recent photo from a real estate blog showed it abandoned, windows boarded up, the brick facade crumbling, weeds growing through cracks in the front steps. The caption said the building had been condemned for safety violations in 2019, but never demolished because of its historical status. That's what she'd inherited. A condemned courthouse. A building worth nothing, probably costing thousands in back taxes and repairs. Jennifer felt hope deflate, like a punctured balloon. Of course it wasn't a miracle. It was just another problem. Another thing to deal with. Another reminder that good things didn't happen to people like her. But it was property. It was something. Even if it was worthless, even if it was falling apart, it was more than she had now. And maybe, just maybe, they could at least have walls around them. A roof that wasn't a car ceiling. Space to breathe. Morning came slowly, the sky shifting from black to gray to pale blue. Lily woke up at 7, crying for another bottle. Jennifer fed her, changed her, and waited until 9 o'clock to call the law firm again. This time, someone answered on the second ring. Matthews and Associates. This is Carol speaking. Hi, my name is Jennifer Hayes. I received an email last night about an estate. I left a message early this morning. Oh yes, Miss Hayes. Mr. Matthews has been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. I'll transfer you to him right now. 2 weeks. They'd been looking for her for 2 weeks, but Jennifer's mail was being forwarded to a P.O. box she could barely afford to check. She'd missed the initial notifications. A man's voice came on the line. Older, professional. Miss Hayes, thank you for calling. I'm Robert Matthews. I've been handling Judge Hayes's estate. I'm very sorry for your loss. I didn't know him, Jennifer said. I didn't even know he existed until last night. That's not uncommon in these situations. The judge was quite private in his later years, but he was very clear in his will. You're his great niece, his only living blood relative. Everything he had goes to you. The courthouse building. Yes, the building and the land it sits on. About half an acre in downtown Grayson. I should be clear, Miss Hayes. The property is in rough condition. It's been condemned. The taxes are in arrears, and it would require significant investment to make it habitable or sellable. I felt it was important to set your expectations appropriately. Jennifer's throat tightened. How much are the back taxes? About $1,100. You'd have 90 days to pay them, or the county would auction the property. $1,100 might as well have been $11 million. Jennifer had $17. Can I see it? She asked. The building? Of course. When would you like to come by the office? Today. As soon as possible. Mr. Matthews paused, perhaps hearing the desperation in her voice. Would 10 o'clock work? I can meet you at the property itself, if that's easier. Give you a tour before we handle the paperwork. Yes, please. Where is it? He gave her the address. 114 Main Street, Grayson. Jennifer plugged it into her phone's GPS. 93 miles. An hour and 40 minutes of driving. She had a quarter tank of gas. Maybe enough to get there. Probably not enough to get back. She'd figure it out. She always did. Jennifer drove with Lily in the back seat, babbling happily at a stuffed elephant Daniel had bought before he left. The highway stretched out ahead of them, morning sun burning off the last of the fog. Jennifer's hands shook on the steering wheel, from lack of sleep, from hunger, from hope she couldn't quite suppress. Grayson turned out to be the kind of small Virginia town that looked frozen in time. Main Street had brick storefronts and old-fashioned streetlights. Half the businesses closed with faded, "For lease" signs in the windows. The courthouse was impossible to miss, sitting at the end of the street like a monument to better days. Up close, it looked worse than the photos suggested. The brick was crumbling in places, water damage visible around the windows. The front steps were broken. Yellow caution tape stretched across them. The copper dome was black with tarnish, pieces of it missing entirely. The building leaned slightly to one side, or maybe that was Jennifer's imagination. A silver sedan was parked in front. A man in his 60s stepped out, wearing a suit that had seen better years, but was still pressed and professional. Miss Hayes? Jennifer got out of the car, pulling Lily in her carrier. Mr. Matthews? He looked at the baby with surprise, then concern, then something like understanding. I didn't realize you had a child. The courthouse isn't in any condition for a baby. It's not safe structurally. I understand. I just need to see it. Mr. Matthews studied her for a long moment, his experienced lawyer's eyes taking in her unwashed hair, the wrinkled clothes she'd been wearing for 3 days, the car packed with everything she owned. His expression softened. When did you last eat, Miss Hayes? The question broke something in Jennifer. Her eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for months. Yesterday, I think. I don't remember. Mr. Matthews pulled out his phone. There's a diner 2 blocks over. I'm going to call in an order for pickup. You're going to go eat something. Then we'll talk about the building. No arguments. 20 minutes later, Jennifer sat in a booth at Millie's diner, Lily in her lap, eating eggs and toast and hash browns, while Mr. Matthews sat across from her with a cup of coffee. He'd paid for the meal without comment, waving away her attempts at protest. "How long have you been homeless?" he asked gently. Jennifer set down her fork. 3 months. I lost my job. My boyfriend left. I couldn't pay rent. It all happened fast. And you've been living in your car with your daughter? Yes. Miss Hayes, I'm going to be direct with you. The courthouse is not livable. It needs at least $30,000 in repairs before it would even be safe to walk through, let alone live in. The electrical system is shot. The plumbing doesn't work. And portions of the roof have collapsed. The Historical Society has been trying to raise funds to restore it for years with no success. Jennifer's last shred of hope crumbled. So, it's worthless. As a building, currently, yes. As property, it has value. The land alone is probably worth $15,000, maybe $20,000. But, with the back taxes and the cost of demolition, if the county forces it, you'd be lucky to break even. So, I inherited a condemned building. I can't afford to pay taxes on that. I can't sell for enough to matter. Jennifer laughed, a bitter sound. Of course. Mr. Matthews sipped his coffee. There is one thing. The judge left a letter. I was instructed to give it to you personally. He pulled an envelope from his briefcase, yellowed with age, sealed with wax. Jennifer's name was written across the front in shaky handwriting. Jennifer opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was harder to read, clearly written by someone very old or very ill. Jennifer, I don't expect you to remember me. We only met once, when you were very small. At a family gathering your father dragged me to, against my better judgment. You spilled juice on my shoe and cried like your heart was broken until I told you it was my favorite shoe, and now it was even better. You believed me, because children believe truth when they hear it. I saw something in you then. A fire. A refusal to give up, even when small things went wrong. I hope you still have that. This building was my life's work. Not the judging. That was just work. But what came after? What I built in secret. What I hid away, because the world wasn't ready for truth. The taxes must be paid within 90 days. Inside the building, in the judge's chambers on the 3rd floor, you'll find a key in the desk drawer, second from the left, under a false bottom. That key opens what matters. Don't give up before you look. Don't assume you know what you've inherited. The building is condemned, but what's beneath it is sound. What's hidden is valuable. What's waiting is yours. You'll know what to do. Trust yourself the way I trusted you when you were 3 years old and crying over a shoe. Some things are worth the mess. Harold Hayes. Jennifer read the letter twice, her heart pounding. Mr. Matthews was watching her carefully. May I ask what it says? He says, there's something hidden in the judge's chambers. Something valuable. Mr. Matthews frowned. Miss Hayes, I handled the judge's estate personally. I went through that building thoroughly. There's nothing of value there. Old furniture, boxes of legal documents from his career, some personal effects. Nothing worth anything. He mentions a key. In the desk, in his chambers. I saw that desk. It's falling apart. The drawers barely open. But did you check for a false bottom? Mr. Matthews paused. No, I didn't. Jennifer stood up, Lily against her chest. I need to see it. Now. Mr. Matthews started to protest. then seemed to recognize something in Jennifer's expression that Fire Harold Hayes had mentioned. That refusal to give up. All right, but I'm going with you, and we're being careful. That building is dangerous. They drove the 2 blocks back to the courthouse. Mr. Matthews had a key to the front door, the lock stiff but functional. The door opened with a groan of rusted hinges, revealing a dark entrance hall. The smell hit Jennifer immediately. Mold and rot, and decades of abandonment. Light filtered through gaps in the boarded windows, casting strange shadows across cracked floor tiles. "Watch your step, Mr. Matthews said, his phone flashlight cutting through the gloom. The floor is unstable in places. They climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under their weight. The second floor was worse than the first. Holes in the ceiling showing the 3rd floor above. Water damage everywhere. By the time they reached the 3rd floor, Jennifer's heart was hammering, though whether from exertion or anticipation, she couldn't tell. The judge's chambers were at the end of the hall, the door marked with a tarnished brass plate. Honorable Harold Hayes, Circuit Court Judge. The door was locked. Mr. Matthews had a key for this, too. It opened into a large room with tall windows, most of the glass broken out. An enormous wooden desk sat in the center, papers scattered across its surface, everything covered in dust and bird droppings. Bookshelves lined the walls, books swollen with moisture and falling apart. A judge's robe hung on a hook, moth-eaten and faded. Jennifer approached the desk, Lily quiet against her chest as if sensing the importance of the moment. She tried the second drawer on the left. It stuck, swollen with humidity. She pulled harder, and it jerked open, spilling old pens and paper clips across the floor. The drawer appeared empty. Jennifer reached inside. Feeling along the bottom, her fingers found a seam, barely noticeable. She pressed, and a panel of wood lifted away, revealing a shallow space underneath. In that space lay a single key, brass, about 3 inches long, with an unusual circular head engraved with numbers. "What is it?" Mr. Matthews breathed, leaning closer. Jennifer lifted the key carefully. It was heavy, solid, clearly made to open something substantial. But what? She looked around the office, searching for anything with a keyhole, any locked cabinet or safe. Nothing obvious. Harold's letter said what's beneath the building, what's hidden. Jennifer looked at Mr. Matthews. Is there a basement? Of course. Old courthouses always had basement levels for record storage, holding cells, things like that. But I was told it was completely flooded years ago. Inaccessible. Can we check? They descended back to the 1st floor. Mr. Matthews led her through a side corridor to a door marked Basement Access. It was locked with a modern padlock, clearly added recently. The county sealed it off for safety. Mr. Matthews explained. The stairs were judged too dangerous. Jennifer studied the padlock. Do you have the keys to the building? All of them? Just the front door and the judge's chambers. Those were the only keys in the estate. Jennifer looked at the brass key in her hand, then at the padlock. Different entirely. Whatever this key opened, it wasn't the basement door. She called out, her voice echoing in the empty building. Hello? Is there another entrance to the basement? The absurdity of asking questions of an empty courthouse struck her, but she was too desperate to care. Then she noticed something. The floor tiles in this corridor were different from the main hall. Darker, older. She knelt down, brushing away years of dirt and debris. Some of the tiles were cracked, but in a pattern, not random, almost like they'd been disturbed and replaced poorly. Jennifer pried at one of the cracked tiles with her fingernails. It lifted away easily, revealing not concrete underneath but wood. A trapdoor. "Mr. Matthews, help me." Together they cleared away the tiles, revealing a wooden hatch about 3 feet square. It had a keyhole, corroded but visible. Jennifer's hands shook as she inserted the brass key. It fit perfectly. She turned it and heard the click of an old mechanism releasing. The hatch was heavy, but Mr. Matthews helped her lift it. Below was a ladder descending into darkness, metal rungs that looked surprisingly clean despite their age. "Miss Hayes, we shouldn't go down there. We don't know what's there. It could be flooded, could be collapsed." Jennifer looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. She thought about the car in the parking lot, with everything they owned. About $17 in her bank account, and nowhere to sleep tonight. About Harold Hayes's letter, his faith in a 3-year-old's fire. "I'm going down. You can wait here." Before Mr. Matthews could protest further, Jennifer adjusted Lily's carrier and started down the ladder. The metal was cold under her hands, the descent longer than she expected. She counted 20 rungs before her feet hit solid ground. She was in a tunnel, concrete, with electric lights running along the ceiling, though they weren't powered. Her phone's flashlight showed the tunnel extending about 50 feet, ending at what looked like a heavy door. She walked forward carefully, testing each step, half expecting the floor to give way. The door was steel, serious, the kind you'd see in a bank vault. It had a combination lock, old-fashioned with a dial and handle. Jennifer's heart sank. She didn't have a combination. Harold's letter hadn't mentioned numbers beyond the engraving on the key. She looked at the key again, the circular head with numbers engraved. 042759. What did they mean? A date, maybe. April 27th, 1959. She tried it on the lock. Right 2 full rotations to 4, left past 4 to 27, right to 59. She pulled the handle. Nothing. She tried variations. Different directions. Different numbers of rotations. Nothing worked. Frustration built in her chest, mixing with exhaustion and hunger, and 3 months of barely surviving. She was so close to something, to an answer, to whatever Harold Hayes had hidden, and she couldn't open the last door. Lily stirred, making small sounds. Jennifer bounced automatically, her mind racing. The numbers had to mean something. The 27th of April, 1959. She pulled out her phone and searched for that date. What happened on the 27th of April, 1959? The results showed historical events, but nothing that seemed connected to Harold Hayes. Then she tried a different search. Harold Hayes, birth date. The obituary came up. Harold Francis Hayes, born the 4th of October, 1927, died the 29th of March, 2023. The 4th of October, 1927. The numbers on the key read 042759. She'd been reading them wrong, not a month and day, but backwards. Read forward. They were 957240. She tried the combination again. Right to 9, left past 9 to 5, right to 7, left to 2, right to 4, left to 0. The handle moved. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. Jennifer pulled the door open, and her phone's flashlight revealed what Judge Harold Hayes had been hiding for decades. The room beyond was the size of a large courtroom, carved out of the bedrock beneath the old courthouse. The walls were lined with metal shelving units, industrial and serious, and on those shelves were lockboxes, hundreds of them, identical, each about the size of a large shoebox, each with a numbered tag. Jennifer stepped inside, her footsteps echoing. The air was dry, cool, preserved. She approached the nearest shelf and opened one of the boxes. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were stacks of currency, old bills, preserved in plastic sleeves. She opened another box. Gold coins, dozens of them, gleaming in her phone's light. Another box held silver bars. Another contained what looked like stock certificates, yellowed but protected. Her hands shaking, Jennifer walked through the room, opening boxes randomly. Bearer bonds, rare coins, more currency, some of it foreign, jewelry, more gold, documentation in careful folders. She found a ledger on a small desk in the corner, leather-bound and thick. She opened it to the last page. The handwriting was the same as the letter, shaky but legible. The entry was dated 3 weeks before Harold's death. Final accounting. Collection value as of March 2023. Gold reserves, approximately $47,300,000. Currency collection, rare bills, foreign notes, complete sets, approximately $39,700,000. Precious metals, silver, platinum, approximately $18,900,000. Bearer bonds and securities, approximately $94,200,000. Jewelry and precious stones, approximately $28,400,000. Art and historical documents, approximately $34,500,000. Total estimated value, $263 million. All acquired legally over 50 years. All documented, all protected for a reason. For Jennifer, because she believed me about the shoe, because she'll need it, because the fire I saw in her is worth preserving. Don't let the government take this. It's not theirs. It's yours. You earned it by surviving, by getting this far, by not giving up. Use it to build something that matters. That's all justice ever was. Building something worth protecting. Harold Hayes. Jennifer's legs gave out. She sat hard on the concrete floor, Lily still strapped to her chest, and stared at the words, $263 million, hidden in boxes under a condemned courthouse, left to her by a man she'd met once when she was 3 years old. She started laughing, a sound that turned into sobbing. Lily began to cry in response, startled by her mother's emotional outburst. Jennifer held her daughter close, rocking back and forth on the floor of a secret vault, surrounded by more wealth than she could comprehend. Still wearing clothes she'd slept in for 3 nights, still having $17 in her bank account, still technically homeless. "We're okay," she whispered to Lily, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, we're going to be okay." Above them, she heard Mr. Matthews calling down the hatch, his voice concerned. "Miss Hayes, are you all right? What did you find?" Jennifer looked around the vault one more time, at the carefully organized wealth of Judge Harold Hayes, at this impossible gift from someone who died, believing in a fire he'd seen in a 3-year-old child 50 years ago. She climbed to her feet, adjusted Lily in her carrier, and walked back to the tunnel. She climbed the ladder, one-handed, emerged into the abandoned corridor, where Mr. Matthews stood waiting, worry clear on his face. "I found it," Jennifer said simply. Everything he promised. Everything we need. Over the next hour, Jennifer led Mr. Matthews down into the vault. She watched his expression shift from skepticism to shock to something like awe as he realized what he was seeing. He examined the ledger, the documentation, the careful records Harold Hayes had kept of every acquisition. "This is real," Mr. Matthews said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "All of it. This is one of the most significant private collections I've ever seen, and it's all legal." He documented everything, provenance for every piece. "Miss Hayes, do you understand what this means? That I'm not homeless anymore, that you're one of the wealthiest women in Virginia." Jennifer looked at the boxes of treasure surrounding them. "What do I do? How do I claim it? How do I access it without losing everything?" Mr. Matthews was quiet for a long moment, lawyer's wheels turning. "Very carefully. First, we secure this location. Then we bring in specialists, appraisers, security. We move slowly, document everything, ensure nothing is questioned or seized. This will take time, maybe months, but if we do it right, this is your future, your daughter's future. The taxes on the building. I have 90 days. I'll cover them. Consider it a loan against the estate. Miss Hayes, where are you staying tonight?" Jennifer's throat tightened. "In my car. In a parking lot somewhere." Mr. Matthews pulled out his phone. "My wife and I have a guest room. You and your daughter will stay with us while we sort this out. No arguments. Tomorrow, we'll start the process of claiming your inheritance properly. Tonight, you need rest, food, and safety." Jennifer wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some dignity, but she was too tired, too overwhelmed. And for the first time in 3 months, someone was offering help without judgment, without strings, just simple human kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Jennifer lay in a real bed in Mr. Matthews's guest room, Lily in a borrowed crib beside her, and tried to process what had happened. She'd woken up homeless in a gas station parking lot. She'd ended the day in a guest room with a full stomach, and a future she couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. She thought about Harold Hayes, this man she didn't remember, who'd seen something in her when she was 3, who'd spent 50 years building a treasure specifically for her, for this moment, for when she needed it most, who'd trusted that the fire he'd seen in a child crying over a juice-stained shoe would still be burning decades later when everything else had burned away. The next weeks were a blur of activity. Mr. Matthews brought in his entire firm to handle the legal aspects. They contacted the IRS, filed the appropriate documentation, hired appraisers and security experts. Jennifer learned that Harold Hayes had been more than just a circuit court judge. He'd been a serious collector, someone who'd spent his entire life and income acquiring rare and valuable items. He'd lived modestly, plowing every penny into his collection, building wealth with the intention of leaving it to someone who would need it. The appraisers confirmed the ledger's numbers. If anything, they were conservative. Some of the items had appreciated significantly since Harold's estimates. The total value was closer to $275 million when all was said and done. The tax situation was complex, but manageable. Because Harold had documented everything so meticulously, proving legal acquisition and ownership, the estate taxes were substantial but not catastrophic. After all taxes, fees, and expenses, Jennifer would retain approximately $187 million in liquid assets. $187 million. The number was so large it lost meaning. Jennifer couldn't comprehend it. She'd gone from counting pennies for baby formula to having more money than some small countries. The transition was too abrupt, too complete. She felt unmoored, like she was living someone else's life. The media found out, of course. They always did. The story was too perfect, too cinematic. Homeless single mother inherits fortune from reclusive judge. The headlines wrote themselves. Jennifer did a few interviews, carefully managed by Mr. Matthews, telling just enough of her story to satisfy curiosity without revealing everything. She became a symbol, an inspiration, proof that miracles still happened in America. But Jennifer knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was intentional. Harold Hayes had chosen her, specifically, deliberately, had built this treasure for her across decades, believing in something he'd seen in a moment that she didn't even remember. That was the real story. Not luck or divine intervention, but one person's faith in another person's potential. Jennifer paid off every debt she had: medical bills, credit cards, the back rent she'd owed when she was evicted. She bought a house, not a mansion, just a comfortable 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood with a yard for Lily. She bought a reliable car. She set up trusts for Lily's education and future. She established a college fund that would see her daughter through graduate school if she wanted it. Then she thought about what to do with the rest. $180 million was more than she needed, more than Lily would ever need, more than their family could spend in 10 lifetimes. It needed purpose, needed to matter. Jennifer remembered every humiliation of those 3 months, every pitying look, every door that closed, every moment of crushing shame. She remembered the impossibility of finding work when childcare cost more than wages, the endless cycle of needing money to solve problems but needing solutions to get money, the way the system seemed designed to keep you down once you fell through the cracks. She started a foundation, modest at first, focused on single mothers facing crisis, not just charity, but actual structural support, free childcare, job training, emergency housing, legal assistance, medical care, all the things Jennifer had needed and couldn't find. The foundation's model was simple. When a woman applied, she got a caseworker who stayed with her for 2 years, helping navigate every obstacle, connecting her to resources, removing barriers one by one. No judgment, no bureaucracy, no proving you deserved help. Just immediate, practical support designed to break the cycle of poverty rather than manage it. The first woman the foundation helped was named Maria, 23, with twin boys and an abusive ex-husband who'd left her with nothing. She'd been sleeping in a church shelter, working overnight cleaning jobs while the church watched her sons. When Jennifer met her, Maria cried, saying she'd prayed for a miracle but never believed one would come. Jennifer held Maria's hands and told her, "This isn't a miracle. It's just one person who remembers what it feels like, deciding to make it different for someone else. You're going to be okay. I promise." Within a year, the foundation had helped 63 women and their children. Within 2 years, over 200. Jennifer funded it generously, never hesitating to write another check, never worrying about depleting the principal. She had more money than she could ever spend. She might as well spend it on something that mattered. The Courthouse building underwent an enormous renovation. Jennifer paid for it personally, refusing to let it be demolished despite its condition. She hired the best restoration experts in Virginia, who spent 18 months bringing the building back to its former glory. The copper dome was replaced, the brick facade restored, the interior rebuilt with careful attention to historical accuracy. When it reopened, it wasn't a courthouse anymore. It was the Hayes Center for Family Justice, offering free legal services to families in crisis. Divorce assistance, custody support, domestic violence protection, estate planning for people who'd never thought they'd have estates to plan. The vault below remained sealed, known only to Jennifer and Mr. Matthews, a secret memorial to the man who'd built it. Lily grew up in comfort and security, never knowing the desperation of those first 8 months. Jennifer told her the story gradually, age-appropriate pieces, as she got older. By the time Lily was 10, she understood that they'd once been homeless, that a relative she'd never met had saved them, that their life was different because of one person's extraordinary act of faith. "Why did he choose us?" Lily asked once, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, while Jennifer made dinner in their comfortable house, with its full refrigerator and working utilities. Jennifer thought about that moment, the one she didn't remember, spilling juice on an old man's shoe. "I think he saw something in me, something that suggested I'd survive, that I wouldn't give up, and he wanted to reward that, to invest in it, to make sure it wasn't wasted." "Do you think you would have survived without the money?" Jennifer paused, considering the question honestly. "I don't know. I was trying. I was doing everything I could. But the system is designed to keep you down once you fall through. Would I have found my way back up? Maybe. Maybe not. The money didn't save my life, but it saved my future. And yours." When Lily was 12, Jennifer took her to the courthouse, to the restored judge's chambers, where Harold Hayes had presided over cases for nearly 30 years. They stood at the windows looking down at Main Street, now revitalized with new businesses and life brought back by the renovations the foundation had funded. "He sat here," Jennifer said, "making decisions about people's lives, trying to be fair, to see them clearly, to give them what they deserved. And then he went home and built a treasure, piece by piece, believing one day it would matter to someone who needed it." "Do you think he knew how much you'd need it?" Lily asked. "I think he hoped. I think he had faith that whoever ended up with it would need it exactly as much as it could help. And he was right." Jennifer never forgot what it felt like to be desperate. She maintained the foundation personally, meeting every woman they helped, hearing their stories, seeing herself in their fear and exhaustion. She funded it so generously that within 5 years it had expanded to 7 states, helping thousands. She didn't remarry, though there were offers. She dated cautiously, never forgetting Daniel's abandonment, never fully trusting anyone with the vulnerability she'd felt in those dark months. Instead, she focused on Lily, on the foundation, on building something that mattered with the resources she'd been given. When reporters asked her about her sudden wealth, about going from homeless to one of the richest women in Virginia overnight, Jennifer always gave the same answer: "I didn't earn this money. Someone who believed in me earned it and left it for me when I needed it most. My job is to honor that faith by passing it forward, by being for other women what Judge Hayes was for me, a believer, a supporter, a person who says, 'I see your fire, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't go out.'" On the 10th anniversary of finding the Khan's vault, Jennifer stood in the Hayes Center at a celebration honoring the 1,000th family helped by the foundation. The building gleamed with restoration, filled with people who'd found justice and support within its walls. Lily, now 18, and headed to college in the fall, stood beside her mother, proud and poised. Mr. Matthews, now semi-retired but still involved with the foundation's legal work, raised a glass. To Harold Hayes, who built a treasure not for himself, but for someone he barely knew, believing that faith was an investment worth making. Everyone raised their glasses. Jennifer felt tears on her cheeks, the same tears she'd cried that day in the vault when she'd first realized the magnitude of what she'd been given. She thought about the letter, the one she kept framed in her office. Some things are worth the mess. Harold Hayes had written that about a juice stain on a shoe, but he'd meant it about everything. About believing in people, about taking chances, about building something that mattered even if you never saw the result. Jennifer had been worth the mess. The 50 years Harold spent building his collection, the complex will and hidden vault, the trust in a 3-year-old's fire, all of it had been worth it, because Jennifer had survived, had thrived, had taken what she'd been given, and built something that helped hundreds of others survive and thrive. That night, after everyone had gone home, Jennifer took Lily down to the vault. It remained sealed except for special occasions, preserved exactly as Harold had left it. The ledger still sat on the desk, the empty shelves testament to wealth redistributed. "This is where it all changed," Jennifer told her daughter, "where I stopped being helpless and started being powerful. Not because of money, but because someone believed I was worth believing in." Lily ran her hand along the metal shelving. "Do you think he's proud of what you did with it?" Jennifer smiled. "I think he knew exactly what I'd do with it. I think that's why he left it to me." They climbed back up, sealed the vault behind them, and walked through the beautiful building that had once been condemned. Jennifer turned off the lights one by one, Lily beside her, and locked the front door. Outside, Main Street was alive with evening activity. Families walked past, couples on dates, teenagers hanging out. All of it made possible by revitalization, funded with wealth that had been hidden beneath their feet for decades. Jennifer put her arm around Lily and looked up at the restored copper dome gleaming in the streetlights. "You know what I learned from all this?" she said. "What?" "That survival isn't about luck. It's about holding onto your fire when everything around you is trying to put it out. Judge Hayes saw that fire in me when I was 3, and he invested 50 years in keeping it alive. Now it's my job to see it in other people, to be the one who believes when no one else does. That's what the foundation is," Lily said, "believing in people." "Exactly. And it works because belief is powerful. More powerful than money. Though money helps. The money was just Judge Hayes's way of saying, 'I believe in you. Don't give up.' And I didn't. And now neither do the women we help." They walked to the car, Jennifer's reliable sedan. Nothing flashy, just safe and comfortable. As she drove them home to their house with its full refrigerator and warm beds, Jennifer thought about the Toyota Camry she'd lived in for 3 months. She'd kept it, serviced and maintained, parked in their garage. Sometimes, when things felt overwhelming, when the foundation work was particularly hard or Lily was struggling, Jennifer would sit in that car and remember the fear, the hunger, the exhaustion. Remember how close she'd come to losing everything. Remember the moment she'd opened Harold Hayes's letter and felt hope for the first time in months. Remember climbing down into that vault and finding salvation in boxes of gold and bonds and currency. She'd remember, so she never took anything for granted. so she never forgot what desperation felt like. So she stayed motivated to help others climb out of the same darkness. "Mom?" Lily's voice broke through her thoughts. "You okay?" Jennifer smiled at her daughter. This beautiful young woman who'd never remember those early months of hardship but who'd grown up understanding the value of helping others. "I'm perfect, baby. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." And she was. Not because of money, though the money had made everything possible, but because someone had believed in her fire when she was too young to even understand she had it. Someone had invested decades in protecting that fire, nurturing it from afar, ensuring it had fuel when everything else had been burned away. Judge Harold Hayes had been right. Some things were worth the mess. Jennifer Hayes's life was proof. From homeless to wealthy, from desperate to secure, from broken to whole. The treasure he'd built hadn't just changed her circumstances. It had validated her existence, confirmed that she mattered, that her struggle was worth something. And now, every day, through the foundation and the center and the hundreds of women she'd helped, Jennifer passed that validation forward. She looked at people society had discarded and said, "I see your fire. I believe in it. Here's fuel. Keep burning." That was the real treasure Judge Harold Hayes had left behind. Not gold or bonds or currency, but faith. Faith that one person's belief could change another person's life. Faith that kindness compounded across time. Faith that a juice stain on a shoe could be the beginning of something that mattered decades later. Jennifer lived that faith every day, in every decision, in every woman helped, in every family saved. She'd inherited $187 million, but the real inheritance was simpler and more valuable. The knowledge that she was worth believing in, and that knowledge, shared with hundreds of others, was worth more than all the gold in Judge Harold Hayes's vault. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Jennifer was reviewing grant applications in her office at the Hayes Center. The number was unfamiliar, a Washington, D.C. area code that made her hesitate before answering. She'd learned to be cautious about unknown calls, especially since her story had gone public. "Miss Hayes, this is Director Patricia Caldwell from the National Archives. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Jennifer set down her pen, her instincts immediately alert. "How can I help you, Director Caldwell?" "I'm calling about Judge Harold Hayes and the collection you inherited. We've been conducting research into federal asset preservation programs from the Cold War era, and your great-uncle's name appeared in some recently declassified documents. I was hoping we could meet to discuss what you found in his estate." Jennifer's stomach tightened. She'd been waiting for this, dreading it really, ever since the appraisers had questioned where Harold had acquired such an extensive collection. The provenance was documented. Everything appeared legal. But there were gaps in the records, periods where Harold's acquisitions accelerated beyond what his judicial salary could explain. Everything in Judge Hayes's collection was properly documented and taxed, Jennifer said carefully. The IRS cleared the entire estate. "I'm sure they did. This isn't about taxes or legality, Miss Hayes. It's about history. We believe your great-uncle may have been part of a classified program, and we're trying to piece together what happened. I'd simply like to talk, entirely off the record. No legal implications, just historical curiosity." Jennifer didn't believe in off-the-record conversations with federal officials, but she was curious too. Harold's letter had been cryptic about his life's work, about what he'd built in secret. Maybe Director Caldwell could fill in some blanks. They met 3 days later at a coffee shop in Richmond. neutral territory, away from both D, C, and Grayson. Patricia Caldwell turned out to be a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone who spent her life with documents and archives. She carried a leather portfolio that she set carefully on the table between them. "Thank you for meeting me," Patricia said, after they'd both ordered coffee. "I know this must feel intrusive, especially given everything you went through to claim your inheritance. You've read about me. Everyone has. Your story was quite remarkable, homeless to one of Virginia's wealthiest women in a single day. The stuff of fairy tales." "It didn't feel like a fairy tale," Jennifer said. "It felt like drowning and then suddenly remembering how to breathe." Patricia nodded, something like understanding in her eyes. She opened her portfolio and pulled out several photocopied documents, yellowed, originals preserved behind plastic. "These are from 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis had just ended, and the government was scrambling to establish continuity protocols in case of nuclear war. One program, never officially acknowledged, involved placing certain assets with trusted civilians." Jennifer's pulse quickened. "Assets? Like what?" "Currency, precious metals, negotiable bonds. Things that would retain value even if the banking system collapsed. The theory was that if Washington was destroyed, if the government fractured, these hidden reserves could be used to rebuild, to maintain some semblance of order and economy." "That sounds like something out of a spy novel." "It does, doesn't it? But it was real. About 40 people were selected, all of them with specific qualifications. They had to be trustworthy, financially stable, capable of maintaining secrets, and positioned in ways that made them unlikely targets. Circuit court judges in small towns were ideal candidates. Respected, permanent, invisible. Patricia slid one document across the table. It was a memo dated October 1962, classified top secret. Jennifer saw Harold's name listed among others, each assigned a participant number and a regional code. Judge Hayes was participant 17, Southeast Appalachia region. He was given an initial distribution of $5 million in mixed assets, gold, bonds, currency, with the understanding he would preserve them indefinitely. If nuclear war came, he had instructions on how to deploy those assets for regional recovery. If war never came, well, the program just faded into bureaucratic limbo. Jennifer stared at the document. $5 million in 1962 would be worth perhaps $40 million today, adjusting for inflation. But Harold's collection had been valued at over $260 million. This doesn't explain everything he had. The initial distribution was only part of it. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to understand. Most participants just sat on what they were given, maintaining it out of patriotic duty or fear of prosecution. But a few, like your great-uncle, seemed to take the program's mission seriously. They continued acquiring assets, building the reserves, preparing for a catastrophe that never came. Where they got the money for these acquisitions, how they justified it to themselves, that's what we're trying to piece together. Are you suggesting he did something illegal? No, Patricia said quickly. The documentation you provided shows legal purchases, proper transactions, but it also shows a man who spent 50 years acquiring wealth with an almost religious dedication. I'm trying to understand why. What drove him? What did he believe he was preparing for? Jennifer thought about Harold's letter, about him seeing fire in a 3-year-old and deciding she was worth building a treasure for. Maybe he wasn't preparing for nuclear war anymore. Maybe he was preparing for something else, for someone who would need Patras. Patricia was quiet for a moment. The program officially ended in 1977. Participants were supposed to return the assets, but most of the records were lost or destroyed. The few participants still alive were offered immunity if they came forward. Most did, returning what they had left, usually significantly depleted. Judge Hayes never came forward. He just disappeared from public life, continued building his collection, and died without ever acknowledging his role. So, you want to know if he left any records, any explanation? Honestly, I want to understand the mindset. These people were given an enormous burden, told to guard national assets in secret, then abandoned by the very government that recruited them. Some cracked under the pressure. Some became paranoid. Some, like your great-uncle, apparently thrived. I'm writing a book about the program, trying to capture what it meant psychologically to carry that secret. Jennifer made a decision. She pulled out her phone and opened a photo she'd saved months ago, one of the pages from Harold's ledger where he'd written personal reflections. She handed the phone to Patricia. The entry read, June 1979. The government forgot about us, probably hoped we'd all die and the problem would solve itself. But I remember what they told us. Preserve continuity, ensure survival, protect the future. That mission didn't expire just because bureaucrats lost interest. Someone will need this someday. Someone will face a collapse, not of government, but of their personal world. When that happens, what I've built will matter more than it ever would have for nuclear war. I'm no longer working for them. I'm working for whoever comes after. Patricia read it twice, her expression shifting from academic interest to something deeper. He wasn't crazy. He'd just changed his mission parameters. He decided I was worth preparing for, Jennifer said. He met me once when I was 3, saw something he wanted to preserve, and spent 5 decades building a safety net for a moment he'd never witness. That's not paranoia, that's faith. They talked for another hour. Patricia asked about the vault, about how Jennifer had found it, about what it felt like to discover that kind of wealth in her circumstances. Jennifer found herself sharing details she'd kept private, the shame of homelessness, the terror of failing her daughter, the surreal moment of reading Harold's letter and beginning to hope. You know what's strange, Patricia said as they prepared to leave. The program was designed to preserve American prosperity in case of catastrophe. It failed at that, obviously. But in your case, it actually worked. Your great-uncle preserved resources that saved someone when their world collapsed. The mission succeeded, just not in the way anyone planned. After Patricia left, Jennifer sat in her car in the coffee shop parking lot and called Mr. Matthews. I just had a very interesting conversation with someone from the National Archives. She explained the meeting, the documents, the revelation about Harold's participation in a classified program. Mr. Matthews listened without interrupting, his legal mind processing implications. Did she indicate the government wants the assets back? He asked. No. She said the program ended decades ago, that participants who returned assets got immunity, and that the statute of limitations on everything else has long since expired. She was researching for a book, not investigating crimes. Still, this explains some things. The scale of the collection, the secrecy, the elaborate vault. He wasn't just an eccentric collector. He was fulfilling a mission, even after the mission officially ended. Does it change anything? Legally? No. The estate was properly settled. The assets are legally yours. But Jennifer, you might want to consider whether this story should be part of your foundation's narrative. It adds dimension, shows your inheritance wasn't just luck but intentional preservation across decades. Jennifer thought about that. The foundation's power came partly from her story, from the arc of desperation to salvation. Would knowing Harold had been part of a government program enhance that or complicate it? I need to think about it, she said finally. That night, Lily found her mother in the study, surrounded by papers and photographs, piecing together Harold's life. At 18, Lily had grown into a thoughtful young woman, headed to law school in the fall, planning to specialize in family law so she could eventually work with the foundation. "You're obsessing again," Lily said, settling into the chair across from Jennifer's desk. "I met someone today who explained where Harold's money came from. Not all of it, but the seed of it. The government gave him $5 million in 1962 to hide in case of nuclear war." Lily's eyebrows rose. "Seriously? Like a government conspiracy?" "Not a conspiracy. A program. One that got forgotten and abandoned, leaving Harold and others holding assets nobody claimed. He just kept going, kept building the collection, even after the program ended. Why? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The mission gave him purpose. But when the mission ended, he created a new one. He decided I was that mission. That building a treasure for me mattered more than returning assets to a government that had forgotten about him." Lily picked up one of the photographs, a formal portrait of Harold in his judge's robes, stern and unsmiling. "Do you think he was lonely? Like, spending 50 years preparing for someone he met once seems kind of sad." Jennifer hadn't considered it from that angle. Maybe, but maybe loneliness was the price he paid for building something that mattered. Not everyone finds purpose in community. Some people find it in dedication to a future they won't see. That's basically what you do with the foundation. Building futures you won't see. I guess he taught me that. In a way. Showed me that faith in someone else's potential is worth sacrificing for. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lily said, "I've been thinking about my thesis for law school. I want to write about the legal structures that fail single mothers, about how the system is designed to make it almost impossible to climb out once you fall through. I want to use your story, if that's okay." Jennifer felt her throat tighten with emotion. "More than okay. Essential. The story only matters if it changes things, if it helps people understand what needs to be fixed. The foundation helps people individually, which is important. But we also need systemic change, laws that support families instead of punishing poverty. I want to be part of that." Jennifer looked at her daughter. This remarkable human who'd been born into crisis and grown into purpose, and felt overwhelming gratitude, not just for Harold's treasure, though that had made everything possible, but for the opportunity to raise someone who understood that privilege meant responsibility. "Your great-great-uncle would be proud of you," Jennifer said. "He'd see his investment paying dividends he never imagined." The next morning, Jennifer drove to Grayson and let herself into the Hayes Center. It was early, before staff arrived, and she wanted time alone with her thoughts. She walked through the building, running her hand along restored woodwork, looking at photographs on the walls, showing the transformation from condemned ruin to functioning center of community support. She descended into the vault, using the key she kept on a chain around her neck. The space was empty now, all the wealth distributed or invested, but she'd left it intact as a memorial. She sat at Harold's desk, where he'd written his ledger entries, and pulled out a notebook. She began to write, not a letter exactly, but a reflection, a conversation with a man she'd never known, but who'd shaped her life more profoundly than anyone, except her daughter. Dear Harold, I learned today that your treasure started with a government program, that you were given a mission to preserve assets for catastrophe. I wonder if you felt trapped by that mission, obligated to maintain secrets you didn't choose, or if it gave you purpose in a life that might otherwise have felt empty. Either way, you took something bureaucratic and impersonal and transformed it into something deeply human. You looked at a crying 3-year-old and decided she was worth more than nuclear preparedness protocols. You spent 50 years proving that individual human potential matters more than systems or governments or programs. I've tried to honor that. Every woman the foundation helps, every family we support, it's all an extension of your faith. Faith that one person can matter enormously to another person, even across decades, even through death. You gave me more than money. You gave me proof that I was worth saving, worth investing in, worth believing in. And I've spent 10 years passing that proof forward, showing other women that they're worth saving too. Thank you for seeing fire in a child. Thank you for feeding that fire for 50 years. Thank you for trusting it would still be burning when I needed it most. Your investment paid off, not just in dollars, but in lives changed, futures built, hope restored. That's the real treasure you left behind, Jennifer. She left the notebook on the desk, an addition to the memorial this space had become. As she climbed back up to the main level, her phone rang. It was the foundation office. Jennifer, we have a situation. A woman just walked in with 3 kids, living in her car. She's desperate. Can you come? Jennifer felt something shift inside her. A recognition. A full circle moment. I'm 15 minutes away. Get her settled in the family consultation room. Make sure the kids have snacks and activities, and tell her help is here. Real help. The kind that doesn't run out. She drove to the foundation office, thinking about cycles and patterns, about how trauma echoes across time until someone stops it. Harold had stopped her cycle of desperation. Now she stopped it for others. And someday, those others would stop it for people they'd never met. And the ripples would continue spreading until maybe, eventually, the whole system changed. The woman in the consultation room looked exactly like Jennifer had looked 10 years ago. Exhausted, frightened, trying to hold it together for children who deserved better. Jennifer sat across from her and said the words she'd needed to hear a decade earlier. You're going to be okay. I know you don't believe that right now, but I promise you, we're going to make sure you're okay. You're not alone anymore. The woman started crying, the kind of tears that come when you've been strong for too long, and someone finally gives you permission to break. Jennifer held her hand and let her cry, remembering this feeling, this exact moment of hope breaking through despair. Later, after they'd made arrangements for temporary housing, food assistance, childcare support, and employment connections, after the woman and her children had left with real solutions to immediate problems, Jennifer stood at the window watching them drive away in their packed car. Mr. Matthews appeared beside her, holding coffee in 2 mugs. He handed her one without comment. "That woman is going to make it," Jennifer said. "She's got the fire. I can see it. Like Harold saw in you. Exactly like that. And 10 years from now, maybe she'll be the one standing here, watching someone else's desperation and knowing exactly how to help. The cycle continues. Better than a cycle. It's expansion. Each person helped becomes someone who can help others. Harold's treasure doesn't diminish when shared. It multiplies." They stood together, in silence. 2 people who'd stumbled into something larger than themselves and chosen to honor it with action, rather than just gratitude. Outside, Grayson continued its quiet life. A small town that had been dying slowly for decades, until a homeless woman found a fortune and decided the best use of that fortune was lifting others. Jennifer thought about Patricia Caldwell's book, about how Harold's story would be told to people who'd never heard of Grayson or the Hayes Center, or a 3-year-old who'd cried over a juice-stained shoe. She hoped the story captured what mattered: the human element, the faith, the choice to see potential in others and invest everything in protecting it. That evening, she called Patricia and left a message. "I'll cooperate with your book. Full access to Harold's papers, my story, everything. On one condition: the book ends with a call to action. It can't just be historical curiosity. It needs to challenge readers to see the Harold Hayes in their own lives, to identify who needs their faith and investment. Make it matter forward, not just backward." Patricia called back within an hour. "Deal. But Jennifer, you need to write the epilogue. The part about what his legacy became, what you built with it. That's your story to tell. I'll write it. But it won't be an ending, it'll be an invitation." As Jennifer hung up, Lily appeared in the doorway. "Mom, dinner's ready. Also, I've been thinking about my law school thesis. Instead of just analyzing what fails single mothers, I want to draft model legislation, actual laws that could change the system. Use the Foundation's data to prove what works." Jennifer smiled, seeing Harold's investment compounding in ways he could never have imagined. One man's faith in a 3-year-old had created ripples that now extended to law schools and legislation, to systemic change and generational impact. "He'd love that," Jennifer said, "using his treasure to rewrite the rules. That's what treasures are for, right? Not hoarding, using, building, changing things." "Exactly right." They walked to dinner together. This mother and daughter who'd survived homelessness and found fortune and chosen to transform both experiences into purpose. Behind them, the Hayes Center stood illuminated in the evening light, a monument not to wealth but to faith, to the belief that one person could matter infinitely to another person, across time, across death, across every obstacle. Harold Hayes had built a treasure. Jennifer Hayes had built a legacy, and that legacy would continue building itself, person by person, life by life, until the whole broken system learned what Harold had known all along. Everyone contains fire worth preserving, if only someone believes in them enough to keep it burning. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.